Sorry. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so very much for having me. I'm grateful for the invitation to speak this evening, not only in my capacity as CEO for the Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority, but I'm not so sure that you guys know that I'm also part of the constituency. I just live right across there in Kingsland, so it's good to be able to participate and feel like you're also contributing to the community as well. So a couple of things before I get started. I have a pretty loud voice, so I'm going to try to moderate my voice with the microphone so that I don't give everybody a hard time. Number one, we're going to have a conversation this evening, right? So a conversation means that I'm going to talk and I'm going to listen, and I'm hoping that you're going to ask some questions and get some feedback. The preference is that you hold your questions till the end of the presentation, but if you have a really burning question that you feel that you might not remember before I get to the end, raise your hand, I'll take it, and we'll work it through. The second thing, a good conversation means then that you engage even if you don't necessarily agree, right? So agreement is not essential for us to have a good conversation. Medicinal cannabis and talking about cannabis, people have sometimes very strong feelings about it. So we can engage, not necessarily fully agree, but we can still have a good conversation. And the third thing is, I talk pretty quickly. So please stop me. Somebody would give me a nudge from here if I'm going too quickly and losing you and, all of these sorts of things. But I'll try to, as much as possible, make sure that I work through the conversation. And I see somebody from the media is just reminded me that they are writing. So I should be cognizant of that. But a conversation, sometimes in a conversation you just get heated and you just get passionate, so you don't always remember all of those things. So I'm going to try as possible, but again, if I go too quickly or anything like that, please stop me, and like I said, let's engage. So how many of you have heard about the Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority before this evening? A couple of people. So that's awesome, which means that you're engaged. So I'm just peeping to see because I can't see from here. I don't think the presentation is up as yet, but let's not worry about that. We'll go through the conversation. I actually think if it's okay, can I step forward and away from the mic? Because I think that I think we're pretty good. So one of the things that when we talk about medicinal cannabis that sometimes people get confused is over the notion one of recreational. I think I'm getting a signal. I'm going to go back to the mic. Or maybe I can put the mic at the side and that works. Oh, he needs me to have it right there. So I have to be obedient to the rules. Because I think they're recording, so they want me to go back to my spot, right back behind here with the phone. So I can be obedient, everybody. I like to be a little personal. I use my hands a lot, so it's a little bit difficult, but I can work. I can obey. So as I was saying, in the context of medicinal cannabis, one of the things that people normally get confused with is over the different types of regime that you can have for cannabis. So some people get it confused with recreational, yeah? So recreational, or some people will call it adult use, is, normally associated with the ability of people to freely use cannabis, marijuana, under a regime in which it is decriminalized, yeah? Barbados, as we all know, has not moved to recreational cannabis. It is not decriminalized. And the government has indicated that it will do so under a referendum. So what we are talking about this evening is not the recreational use of medicinal cannabis. Some of you may know as well that we also have a regime for sacramental. How many of you are familiar with sacramental and know that sacramental use of cannabis is legal in Barbados? How many of you? One person there. Two. So basically what the sacramental use makes provision for is the recognition that cannabis or marijuana can be used for religious purposes as a sacrament by those that practice it. And under that act, persons who practice the use of cannabis as part of their religion can access it. However, my body that I work for, we are not associated with sacramental. Sacramental use is provided for through the Attorney General's office under the Sacramental Act. All right? So recreational, not in place. Sacramental, I don't know. It's in place, but it's not part of my regime. It's not part of the conversation this evening. But medicinal cannabis, which is what I'm talking about, is part of the regime, is legal. The act was passed in 2019 and the regulations in 2020, October 2020. So we have a legal regime for medicinal cannabis. One of the other questions that we get quite often is, why is it so complicated? Why all this hurrah about medicinal cannabis and we need an act and we need regulations when people have been using this drug for however long? There's recognition of medicinal properties, so why is it that it is so complex? Why do we have to have so much rules and so much regulations? One, because it's a drug. It's a drug, it's a pill, it's something that your parents, that you are going to have to be able to ingest into your body. And I am sure that if you are taking medicine, you want to know that that medicine is properly prepared, correct? You want to know that that medicine is prepared in a way that it is safe, yeah? So, and that is why the regime is different. That is why it's more complex. That's why it has more rules. When you're doing recreational for adult use, nobody is worried about dosage. Nobody is worried about how much will make you feel good or make you feel bad. They're doing it recreationally. When you're doing medicinal cannabis, it is about ensuring that the drug and the quantities of the drug or the dosage of the drug is going to be able to help you alleviate whatever illness or problem that you are having. It's like Panadols. You take 2, they tell you don't take more than the dosage because then you may over. It's the same thing with medicinal cannabis. It is medicine that people have to ingest into their body. So if you are doing medicinal cannabis, it can't just be that you are, just going to say everybody plant it, everybody reap it, and then give it to people to take as a medicine. Because I'm sure that you would not want, again, like I said, to know that you are ingesting something that it is not necessarily prepared as medicine in the best way. So that's important. The other thing, why is it so complex, is because we have to be able to honor international treaties, yeah? And I know that we don't like to hear this notion of international treaties, we're sovereign and all of that. But whether we like it or not, as a country, we are governed and participate in international treaties and international bodies. So there is an international body that manages regulates how drugs and particularly what they're called narcotics are used nationally. And that body is called the International Narcotics Control Body, yeah? And it's part of the UN system. And they make the rules around how cannabis, particularly around cannabis, opium, and all of the other narcotics are to be used. And for them, cannabis is still what they call a psychoactive drug. Yeah, so even though that there is recognition that it has medicinal properties and therefore there is a medicinal regime for it, there is still concern over the fact that because this is a psychoactive drug, that it can't necessarily, be used freely. And therefore, within the context of the medicinal cannabis regime, there are a number of different rules that, as a government, we have to be able to follow to make sure that we are aligned with the INCB treaty. Yeah, so that's another important point about the complexity of it. The other point is that, again, because it is a drug, there are standards that we have to be able to make sure that we are aligned to, again, in order to ensure the safety of the drug. Yeah? So we have to make sure that we work with the Ministry of Health. We have to make sure that the standards under which the cultivation is done, under which the processing is done, for the extraction of the medicines, etc., comply with all of the best practices. And there are a number, again, of protocols that govern the standards that we have to be able to adhere to in order, again, to ensure the safety of the production of medicinal cannabis. And the final thing is, the reason why we have a complex, some people would suggest, kind of regime is, imagine if we just allowed everybody to be able to cultivate anywhere. So anybody can, say, I want to plant cannabis, and go and plant cannabis anywhere that they want to. Why would that be a bad thing? So why would that be a bad thing? It would be a bad thing because then first of all, let's look at the business side. If everybody was planting cannabis, who would process it? Who would extract it? How would we make sure that we have a value chain that allows us then to be able to not only cultivate, but then be able to reap properly, be able to process the medicines that we need, to be able to export them, to be able to do the necessary research and development to make sure that we move the process, and we would just be stuck at cultivation only. If we are just stuck at cultivation only, then it harkens back again to the days of the old sugar plantation and plantocracy model, where we just do the primary product. All we do is cultivate. This industry is intended to be different, not just cultivate, not just grow the plant, grow the raw product, then to export it or then to use it here, but that we have a full value chain that we grow within Barbados that allows us to be able as well to produce the end product, the value added product that then becomes important in terms of export and also as well for local use right here in Barbados. So it's important for us to be able to have a regime that monitors what is happening. If we again allow everybody just to grow this plant where they want to, how do we know when they haven't grown it properly? How do we know when there is a bad effect on somebody? So that we have to have a regime in place that allows us to be able to monitor the standards that I talked about before, to ensure safety, to know what is happening within the industry, and to just make sure that for Barbados that we have all the benefits in terms of a full value chain that is necessary. So yes, some people would say it's complex. So yes, we don't have a regime where everybody can grow within their backyard as they please, but again, for the reasons that I have outlined, it is important for us to be able to monitor what it is that we are doing with medicinal cannabis. Everybody is good up to this point? I'm not going too quickly. I'm good? Yeah? Good. So what does the regime look like? So I've talked about the fact that the regime may seem complex to some persons, but what does it exactly look like? So under the medicinal cannabis regime, we have 8 different categories of licenses. 8 different categories of licenses, right? So we have cultivation, we have processing. So you cultivate, you grow, and then you have that processing process, which helps then to extract that final product that I talked about as well. But in order for you to move from cultivation to processing, you have to have somebody then that transports the goods. Because you can't just, for instance, say, all right, I cultivate a field of cannabis, and then again put it in my car and carry it down the road by the guy that can process it. Why can't you do that? Again, it is about safety standards, yeah? I got 2 little puppies that I scattered to the beach in my car. and it's got a lot here. So would you want me to be transporting my cannabis that then you're going to have to put in your body as medicine in my car that I just carry my... You understand, right? So you can't just say that you're going to bring that and transport it as you like. So we have to have a transport license, yeah? So cultivation, you have processing, you have transport, your transport license there. But if you want to be able to import material, and this is very, very important now, because once we talk about an import license, people always automatically feel that what we are talking about is allowing people to import finished product from Canada, from North America to flood the market that we're going to have to compete with. That is not what the import license under the medicinal cannabis regime is for. Again, we are building an industry in Barbados. So we are not having people import end product, but they can import planted materials so that they can import seeds, they can import tissue culture. For instance, right now, phrase this very properly so I don't get myself in trouble, there may be persons on island who may have planted material for cannabis. Maybe, I don't know. They may be. But we're not necessarily sure if that material is good enough in terms of medicine, if the quality is good, if there's sufficient on the island. And so we're working towards being able to understand that landscape. But as we work towards that, if people want then to be able to start, they can also then import material, what we call genetic material, the initial material to start the cultivation, right? So that means that you have an import license that allows you then to be able to import. And everybody doesn't have to have an import license. An individual can just say, listen, I'll have an import license, and when I bring in the material, then I can sell to others who may want to get into cultivation. Huh? So you have an import license. You have an export license. You also then have what we call a retail distributor license, which I never like to call that name because it's a misnomer. That license is really for the operation of a therapeutic facility. And what's a therapeutic facility? It's a place where you can get access to your medicinal cannabis and then also consume it at the same time within the therapeutic facility. And I know that many of you, you're raising your hand, but you're thinking it, how do you mean I could consume my medicinal cannabis in a place so we can got herb houses? No. That is not the intent because we have a medicinal regime. So imagine, for instance, one of the uses for medicinal cannabis is for people who are what you would call in palliative care, right? Perhaps very, very ill, terminal, etc. And they may want to use medicinal cannabis, but use it in the care of a doctor. So you can be able to go to that place where you would have access to a doctor, a nurse, etc., and be able to use your medicinal cannabis and then be able to consume it there as well. So we have that license, and it's going to be, can operate like a spa because you can use different kinds of things in terms of your medicinal cannabis, right, as well. So under the regime, you can have topicals, medicine that you can rub on your skin, and also as well then orals as well that you can ingest as well, yeah? So you can use medicinal cannabis in different ways. So you have that license. We also have a research and development license and a laboratory license as well. So why are these two licenses important? So I'll talk about the laboratory license. Remember when I talked about before the fact that there are standards that have to be adhered to? We have to be able to test those products to make sure that they don't have in things that they should not have. Again, people are cultivating in soil. You want to be able to know that when that person cultivates, that they're not cultivating in soil that's filled with pesticides that you then have to ingest. So we will have standards and limits that allows us to be able to know that whatever product is being produced when we test it is of sufficient quality that people can be able to use it. So that's why we have a laboratory license in there. The research and development license now is extremely important. Barbados is small. You know that there are other countries that are doing medicinal cannabis. Jamaica is larger than us. We're competing against Canada, we're competing against a number of other countries. So the research and development license is going to be able to allow us to do some research on what else can we offer, what else can we extract from medicinal cannabis that can be of use, not only to us, but to the world as well. So we want to be able to explore, to look at different treatments, different ways that we can combine medicinal cannabis. And importantly, we want to be able to see if there is something unique about the soil in Barbados that can then help us to have our own Bajan strain of cannabis. So we have this research and development license that is going to be important to us, and we are hoping is going to be one of the things that is going to distinguish us in the market amongst others. I want to stop here. Any questions so far? You guys good? You got to talk to me. Thought we're having a conversation. So if you got a conversation, we got to talk. They got me lecturing. But everybody good so far? Good. So we have these 8 licenses within the regime. So I want to talk about how do you get access to medicinal cannabis. So again, because it's a medicinal, and you would know I keep stressing on that medicinal cannabis regime, you have to access, you can only access medicinal cannabis with a prescription from a doctor. So you cannot go and knock on Joe Blow, who you may know is a cultivator, and say, give me some of that. All right, give me a vial or how much ever it is you're going to ask for. It has to be prescribed by a doctor. You go to a doctor and the doctor says, I am prescribing based on your condition, I'm going to prescribe medicinal cannabis to you. Then you have to take that cannabis and then take it to a pharmacy. And then that pharmacist will then dispense your medicinal cannabis. So again, there's lots of worry around, whether or not young people would have access to it, how people are going to be able to use it. Is it that we're going to have people, just going anywhere and being able to access the medicinal cannabis? That is not the intent. It has to be prescribed by a doctor. You have to go to a pharmacist in order to be able to get it. Now, under the Act, minors can have access because minors can get ill as well, yeah? Young people can get cancer. Unfortunately, they can get conditions like epilepsy, which medicinal cannabis treats, so they have to have access to it. And once they have a caregiver, somebody who is an adult that can act on their behalf, and again, under a doctor's prescription, then they can have access to that medicinal cannabis. But you can only get it primarily through, only through a prescription by a doctor. Now, I want to talk about how people participate in the industry and get involved in the industry. One of the things that the Act provides for is this notion of a 70-30. Perhaps let me talk there. Let me talk about what you need to do in order to be able to get involved, right? So the eligibility. So first of all, you got to be 18 and over. And that is if you want to get a license. So I'll talk about different ways you can participate. But if you want to get any of the 8 licenses that I talked about before, you have to at least be 18 years and over, a Barbadian, a CARICOM citizen, a permanent resident. But if you are an international company, for you to be able to participate in the industry, you must at least have 30% local ownership. I can say that again. A Barbadian can own 100% if they want. 180%, how much ever you want. But once you're an international company, we have said you cannot own 100%. Again, because we are building a local industry that is to involve Barbadians. So if you are an international company, you must look for local partners, and they must at least, they can own more, but at least 30% must be preserved for Barbadians, CARICOM citizens, permanent residents, in order for them to participate in the industry. And that is extremely important. And that is one of the ways that Barbadians, if you do not want to get a license, that you can participate. And you may say to me, but Chantal, how we can get 30%? Nobody ain't got that capital. But 30% does not always have to mean money. Some of us have land. Yeah? Some of us have land that we can leverage for that 30%. Some of us have other types of resources, expertise, and different things that you can work with an international company to say, I am putting up this 30%. And importantly, what we have said, it is not 30% and then everybody walk away. It's 30%, but you must have direct ownership once you put in that 30%. You know what that means? That you remain a shareholder. So as long as the company is making money, you make money too. Yeah? And you have to be able also as well to have a say in what the company is doing. Again, the important message here is that this industry is designed in this way specifically to ensure that Barbadians can participate. So you can participate, as I said before, through the license regime, the 8 licenses that I mentioned if you want to, or you can participate through this 70-30 arrangement as well. Now, one of the questions that we always get, people say, but when you look at the license, Chantal, these license fees are high. Why did God be so high? The average Barbadian can't get involved if the licenses are so high. So I can put my hand up in the air, I can argue, and I can say the license fees are fairly high. The fact is that the medicinal cannabis regime, if you want to get involved during the license regime, there are a lot of complexities. However, we must take into consideration a couple of things. One, in other jurisdictions, so for instance, people will say that Jamaica's fees don't seem so high. What people are forgetting is that Jamaica fees are annual fees. So they take a look at what Jamaica will have as an annual license fee, compare it, and then say, but Barbados fees high. The license fees are for 5 years. So when you pay your money, you are paying for 5 years. When you pay your money in Jamaica, so you may see Jamaica has a $2,000, and you say, you compare that to my $10,000, and you say, well, that is expensive. What you don't recognize is that the license fees are 5 years in Barbados. All the other jurisdictions normally do annual. And why is that? It's because we recognize the amount of money and work that you have to do in order to build this regime. If I give you a license, anybody in business in here, anybody owns their own business? How long does it take in your business to make a profit, sir? Anybody? Tell me. 5, 10 years. What about you? The guy in the right shirt. How long? Same thing, what, 10 years? So if I give you a license for 1 year, after you put all of that money, you're not going to be able then to produce a profit, and then you're going to come back and pay a license fee every year. When we are saying we're going to give you that license fee for 5 years so that you can realize your investment within that 5-year period and then beyond. So comparatively, I say yes, my license fee is high, but my license fees are for 5 years and not 1 year. Good? The second thing that we must consider as well is that I'm not asking you to pay all the money up front. I'm not asking you to pay all of the money up front. In this regime, you can pay your money in 3 tranches. I'm gonna admit, 60% you gotta pay up front. And work with me. I train, but you gotta work with me. And I got business people here so you would understand. For instance, if I give you a license, right? And I don't take, you got the license for 5 years. So when I give it to you, you got your license for 5 years and you could go along. So if I don't ask for the majority of my money up front, it then means I can go be running you down consistently, correct? In order for you to pay. So we're saying 60% of that has to be paid up front, and then over the next 2 years, we will negotiate with you how you pay off the rest within the next 2 years. So 5 years for your license, and next, you don't have to pay all, it pays in 3 years. The other important consideration when you look at our license fees compared to the others, and I'll not call any names of jurisdictions, but I'll tell you what happens normally. So in other jurisdictions, you would have a license fee that is annual, but then there are also additional costs to that license. So one of the things that happens is we have to have inspectors who would come out and make sure, again, that you are applying by the standards that have been set within the industry. In other jurisdictions, what happens is every single time an inspector comes out, you got to pay an inspection fee. So if that inspector has to come by you 50 times, you got to pay that inspection fee 50 times. There are what we call, in order to be able to secure the industry, you have to have this special software, right? That's called a track and trace software. Again, you have to pay annually for that. So what happens? It's like if you're going to go signed by courts. It looks cheap up front, but you're paying over 5 years, over 10 years, and the interest, every time you look where you can't get it done because a new cost, the interest adding up. What we have done with our license fee is to be able to say, listen, we're putting all of those costs in your license. So when you have that fee up front, as a business person, you are able to plan and predict your costs, because I'm not coming and telling you after year 1, after year 2, pay me this, pay me this, pay me that. You are able to know upfront, this is my license fee, and this is what it is that I am paying over the 5 years, and you will not have to see Chantal coming in your face every 2 minutes. And we think that that is fair. Like I said, it allows people to be able to plan, and that is not to say that upfront that there are additional costs. So for instance, we have an application fee, so you have to pay that application fee. I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to be very upfront, it's non-refundable, so you pay an application fee and you don't get it back. You don't get back your money, and let everybody know, because that application fee you pay upfront, you get that. Then we also have to do due diligence, so there is a fee, but again, Barbadians don't pay it, CARICOM nationals don't pay it, permanent residents don't pay it. Again, only international people pay it. So that's because, we want to make sure that people within the industry, we're not allowing criminal elements to come into the industry. So we have to do an international check. And we pay a company to do that. So we then ask those people to pay that money directly. So that money is collected, but it is specifically for that. So there are some administrative fees that are upfront, but once you do that and you pay your license fee, you are on your merry way, and we absorb all of the other costs that is associated with that. So it's important to be able to understand that as well. So if you want to get in at the license end of it, that's where you have to be. Those 8 licenses, those that cost for your licenses, etc. One of the other things, and I'll move on to talk about, I guess where people are more interested. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Colin.
Okay, Colin.
Who is we?
Who's we? I can't remember when I say we. When I say we. We, the authority. The authority, us as the authority. Yes, sir. No, they're different scales, and also I should have said in the cultivator as well, we have different tiers. So there's a tier 1 cultivator, a tier 2, a tier 3, and a tier 4. And why we have done that is, again, is to allow people to be able to participate at different levels. So a tier 1, for instance, and I'll tell you, is just under 30,000 Barbados, and that's up to an acre, right? So a tier 2 is up to 5 acres. And that cost is going to be different from, of course, the tier 1. But when you come to say, for instance, like a tier 4 is 25 acres and up. And at the tier 4 level, you are paying, and I don't have the precise numbers in my head right now, but you would almost be paying per acre what you would have paid for 1 acre, if that made sense. Yeah? So then the costs are different. So every different license has a different cost attached to it. They're not the same. That answers your question? Yeah. Yes, sir. Hi, Jason. Okay, got you. So, no, as the regulator, we are not responsible for the business end of it, yeah? And because we have to be careful, so for instance, if I come and I tell you, Colin over here, I know Colin over here looking for an investor. When something goes wrong with you and Colin, Jason, you come looking for me, correct? Because I'm the person who introduced you to Colin. But you can put me in trouble. Because I'm the regulator, I'm supposed to regulate. I can't regulate and at the same time then facilitate your business relationships. But what we are doing, because we recognize that this is something that we are now beginning, it's now starting, people would want to know, we are exploring ways in which we can bring people together, some people who are asking about land. So for instance, the best advice we would say is to go through Invest Barbados, because they are the agency that negotiates with investors. So if you have land and you want to be able to reach out, or you're looking for a 30% equity, you can go to them and they will look at the investors that they have and see if they can put you together. But as an agency directly, that's not a service that we offer, right, as the regulators. Because I don't want nobody to come and kill. Fair enough, Jason. We've had a couple of people that have approached us about that, and so we try to be able to handle it as best as we can. But like I said, it's not really our role as a body. So, for instance, if you are doing a business, if you are in the bread business, if you're in the poultry business, if you're in the agriculture business, whatever it is, as a business person, you're responsible for doing all of your market research, looking at the market to say, which are my best partners, where am I going to sell? I'm going to sell to Massey, I'm going to sell to whoever. And that's your responsibility as the business person who is making the investment, right? So we are trying as much as possible to facilitate, but we also need to be able to signal to everyone, all of us, we have small businesses, that we have to take some responsibility for making sure that we understand the market, especially if we're going to be putting money or working with others. We have to be able to take some responsibility for understanding that market and making the connections, and we will do what we can by working with others as well. So we were talking about that, how to get involved. So we looked at that 70-30, we looked at the process of your licenses. So what we have is a fully online application system, and as well, very importantly, so the process is not designed to deny you a license. That is not how we are working at all. The process is designed to make sure that you get a license. So we have a fully online application process, but even before you submit your application, we have a customer liaison officer. So Jason, that's what you were asking about. You can call her and she will say to you, Jason, all right, perhaps I can help you, but this is the best way for you to be able to get connected. That customer liaison officer is responsible for working you through your application from beginning to end. So she will go through with you and tell you all the different pieces of information. You can actually come into our office and she will sit down with you and walk you through your application, help you to actually do it from beginning to end. Even after you submitted that application process initially, our officers then will review that application. But if they find that something is not correct or not done properly, they will not just pass it through the system. They will call you and say, Colin, listen, you were supposed to submit a security plan, but this security plan ain't looking so good. Or you were supposed to submit a premises plan and it ain't draw to scale. And they would actually work through. You're supposed to submit a business plan and the business plan ain't looking so good. They will actually call you and walk you through the process of how to improve it. Not only that, we have guidelines for each of the different license types that you can download that will walk you through and tell you everything that you need to be able to do. And again, not even that. We also have templates So if you want to submit a business plan, you're not sure, you can go on our website, www.bmcla.bb, and download a template for a business plan. You can download a template for a security plan. And so we will be able then to help you walk through the process of your license. Again, this is not about stopping anybody from getting a license. We want to see you get a license and be successful. Yes, sir. Yes, please. Carter, because you do not have to get a license to be involved in security in the industry. You do not have to get a license. You have to get a license to transport. Yeah? If you want to be able to transport medicinal cannabis, you have to be licensed. But if you want to provide security in the industry, you do not have to get a license. How do you mean? Yes. Yes. So, and we would say to anybody who is going to hire a security firm or anybody to work with, they can only hire licensed security people that are already licensed under the Barbados regime. But you do not have to get a license from us. You do not have to pay for a license from us in order to provide security. And that is one of the other things I was going to say to you in terms of involvement. Because every single licensee will have to have security. Every single, regardless of if they're doing a 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre, small plot, big plot, it don't matter. They must have security. Different levels of security. Security cameras, some of them, if you are talking about that 4 acre, which is vast tracts of land, we're going to require them to make sure they have manned security. We actually have specifications in terms of the camera pixels that have to have lighting. Some of them, they need dogs, so that there is a field that is open in the area of security that you don't have to pay me, come to the authority and pay a license for. You just have to be able to position yourself in the industry in order then to be able to participate and get involved. Yeah, in the concept of security. Yes, please, Colin. Yes, please. So the website is www.bmcla.bb, and the act is the medicinal cannabis. The act is the Medicinal Cannabis Act 2019, and you can download it from JS. Yeah, just put in medicinal cannabis and it will come down. Yeah, no problem. Right, so security is one of those areas that is open up. So I'll talk about some of the other areas and some of the other ways that people can get involved and participate as well. So I don't know if my time going, I talk a lot and I can talk for the whole day. So please stop me if I go past my time. So very often people feel that the only way you can get involved in this industry is through a license. Yeah? And again, people say, but the licenses are expensive. Chantal, you're telling me there's 5 years. You're telling me that I can pay in 3 tranches, but it's still expensive. So how can Barbadians participate? What we have to understand is that all of these different license regimes will need support services. Yeah? No? Anybody can see it? If I am a processor, we can take one example that is processing end product. What are some of the things that I am going to need in order to be able to function? Anybody? Anybody? Equipment? So when I say packaging, I can need packaging, I can need labels. Yes, please, Jason? Packaging, I can need labels, I can need to market as well. Everybody with me? I can need to be able to market. If I'm in processing, I'm going to need scientists. Yes? Are you going to need, sorry? IT infrastructure. Thank you so very much for that. So that there are a whole plethora of different jobs that we are going to need in the industry. Even if you're doing cultivation, in medicinal cannabis, you see, I'm going to left the mic there, right? A bad. Alicia, you can probably, let me see if I can follow the slide. No, there should be a slide there that, no, keep going, and then come back to that one. All right, I'm going to talk until you get to where there's going to be a slide that's going to show like all the jobs and everything. That's what, go back to that. Right. So even if you look at even cultivation, right? So people think that cultivation, medicinal cannabis, just got somebody put the plant in the ground, put some water on it, walk away, left it, and come back. It's more scientific than that. And there are different levels that you will need in terms of cultivation. So there are people that are going to have to work, for instance, just look at it. People now are using greenhouses. So we're going to have greenhouse technicians, people who know about that technology, people who know about drip irrigation, people who know about soil, because companies have to have the soil tested. All of that, there are bud tenders. So when the plant is at a particular stage, you need a particular type of worker. As it grows, you need a different type of worker. So even in cultivation, just that one activity, there are a number of different jobs. As I said, in processing, we have a laboratory license. We have a university filled with students who do sciences that can't get jobs. This medicinal cannabis regime has the potential for those students now to be able to find employment in laboratories that are going to be established. Research and development, that's another opportunity as well for those young people. So there are a variety of things that can open up in the context of the industry to be able to provide employment. So the message that we are sending to people is don't only think that the opportunity lies with just getting a license. It is more than that. The industry, they keep going back to it. This is not about an industry like we had before in the corners of sugar, where we're just doing raw materials and we are exporting. And we are then, the employment level is only in the production of the primary product. This is not what the medicinal cannabis regime is about. The full spectrum of production and development is the potential that we have to be able to grab. And one of the things that we have been trying to do in the context of encouraging persons to be able to grab the opportunities is to do a level of training and education. This is why we're so grateful for this opportunity. But we have, over the course of when we started, have engaged over 500 persons just doing training. We've engaged expert cultivators and master growers to be able to tell people this is what you have to do in order to grow the best product that you have to. We have had sessions with processors from overseas and other companies so that we can get ready once the industry is started and be able to be at the forefront. So we are not saying, wait until the industry starts. We're saying get ready now. Start to understand the industry so that you can begin to position yourself in order to be able to take advantage of the opportunities. One of the things that we've already seen happening already is, again, because of COVID, and COVID has been good and bad to us. Pre-COVID, we had investors who were going to come down to Barbados and they were going to spend a lot of time looking at the island and, but now they can't come. So what they are doing is engaging locals in order to be their person on the ground, and we've seen that. We've seen that. People are contacting locals and they contact us and say, listen, we want to be able to do this, but who is the best person here for us to be able to work with? So that's another opportunity. So we are seeing now Barbados now being consultants for these firms in order to help them realize their investment. So again, the opportunities are myriad, and they don't only lie in the license regime. So of course, you might get a license, good. But I'm saying outside of the license, other things as well can happen, and there are other opportunities as well. So 2 more points now, and I'll shut up. So one of the things, and I go back to the question that Jason asked in terms of, well, not directly, but how are we facilitating the process, right? So again, we know that we're regulators. It's not our responsibility to provide jobs for you. It's not our responsibility to provide markets. We are the regulator. As a regulator, we are to look at the rules, make sure that the rules are being, sorry, my time? Okay. Our task is to make sure that the rules are being adhered to, and all of those things. But again, because we recognize that this is an industry that we are now building, we are working as much as possible to facilitate. So we are working through, we have not completed, and I'm being very careful for Mr. Hallam Hope, and I'm calling out your whole name, who is here from the nation to quote me properly. Thank you very much. This program that I'm talking about is not completed, but it is something that we are working on. We are working with an agency under the Ministry of Agriculture. We are under the Ministry of Agriculture, Colin Week, BMCLA. We are under the Ministry of Agriculture. And we're working with this other group under the Ministry of Agriculture called the FEED program, right? And the FEED is the Farmers Empowerment and Enfranchisement Program, which was established by government to assist farmers. And what we are working through, not yet finalized, is a program by which we can have people who are interested in medicinal cannabis. So when I say people, Barbadians who are interested in medicinal cannabis, but may not necessarily have all of the capital or the land, to be able to have them included under the FEED program in a pilot program initially, where they can get some access to land. And get some access to technical inputs, get some access to irrigation and all of those things, in order that they can work through becoming a part of the medicinal cannabis program and an environment that facilitates their entry, because we know that it is competitive. We know this is something that we are building, so we are undertaking this initiative as a way to assist. Yeah? And again, it's something that we're working through. As you can appreciate, it's complex. We have to find the land. We gotta make sure people agree. We gotta be able to put all of these things in place, etc. But I'm gonna say something that may be a little bit controversial, but I am gonna say it anyway because I'm not necessarily afraid of controversy. One of the things that we are always not very good at is working together. Everybody is wanting their own piece. Everybody is, I only feel like it working, or it belongs to me if I own it singly. And that is not always the best way in an environment when you are, as particularly in the medicinal cannabis industry that is so capital intensive. And capital intensive is not just about the licensing. We talk about security. You got to put that fence in. You got to put security there. You got to put all of these things in place. You got to pay for testing, because they got to come and make sure that you got that quality that you have. So there's a lot of capital that is involved in it, again, because it's a medicine. And it is not always that John and Paul and Paulisha can have the money to do that on their own. But if we can get the three of them to come together, put the resources together, put the expertise that they may have together, to work together, then that helps. I know, I walked away from the microphone. Sorry, I'm being bad. I promised to obey and I'm still being bad. So it's important that we appreciate that as Barbadians, in order for us to be able to make a headway, we're going to have to be able to overcome that thing that we have sometimes where we don't necessarily work together. Yeah? And I was saying that in the context of the FEED program, right now, we don't have 1 million acres to give for every single Barbadian who may want to be involved. So it's going to have to be groups of persons who are going to be willing to come together and to be able to work together that will be best placed in order to take advantage of this upcoming opportunity, Mr. Hope. So I'm not announcing anything. This upcoming opportunity that we are working through currently to participate, and that's extremely important. And it can happen. I met two Barbadians that were working in St. Vincent, had a cannabis grow in St. Vincent and working together as a cooperative in St. Vincent. And at the time that I met them, time has gone on so fast, in 2020, at the time that I met them, if you give me that, I can go all about the place. I think you should left it right there. I can't hold it in my hand. I use my hands too much. But what I was saying is that at the time that I met them, they were actually within their cooperative getting ready to export finished product to a partner in the US. These are two average Barbadians, young fellas in their 20s or perhaps early 30s, the most, who were working in a cooperative, a successful grow in St. Vincent. So that there is a model, it can work. And we want to encourage particularly young men who want to get involved to come together under a cooperative model to be able to participate together within the industry. So that we are hoping that once we are able to complete the things that we are doing with this project, that can be one way in which we can facilitate Barbadians. The other initiative that we have and that we're hoping once the industry gets up and running, yes, Jason? Yeah, thanks for that. So I'll be very honest and say we were hoping to finalize it even before now. But certainly, Jason, my own timeline, in terms of as an agency, so I'm hoping within the next 2 months or so. Yeah. But again, please don't quote me on that. Because there are a number of different things that have to go in place in order to be able to do it. Legal things, legislative things, etc. So we have to make sure that all those things come together. The other initiative I was going to speak about is that we are hoping in the near future to be able to roll out a massive internship program so that we can get those companies that are going to establish here to agree to take on interns at various levels within their operations. Again, so that all those university students and young people, etc., can see themselves having an opportunity to work through the industry under a fairly intensive program. The final thing, before I just open up and get some additional questions as well, is that I'm talking about the medicinal cannabis regime as if it is somewhere off. It's not actually somewhere off. We opened applications January 18th. And currently there have been 75 applications. So there's 75 persons, companies, both local and international, that have applied for their licenses. Some of them have applied for as much as 7 licenses. Yeah? And those are going through. And I think that we would have talked about previously that we actually have somebody already that is working their way towards having their application be considered for approval. And out of that number of 75, we then have, because those are what we call draft applications, i.e. they're in the system, they're working through. But out of those, we have 8 persons who've actually paid their application fee. So they've paid up their application fee, and their applications are going through the process. So I'm saying that to say this is not something that is 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road. This is something that before the end of the year, hopefully, all things being equal, that we can see somebody having a medicinal cannabis license. And certainly, the expectation is that, how we all do it, you want to see something happen first. You want to see that first person to make sure that it is actually, going as it should. And then we expect that the floodgates will open. Because out of those that are going through the system, because it's a 14-step system, so we can look and see at each step where people are at. And we have a number of persons that are just sitting at that last stage. And we anticipate that, once we approve or get that first license out the door, that there will be a number of people coming on board. And we get queries every day in relation to the license regime. Yes, sir. All right, so 2 separate things. So the medicinal cannabis regime is legal. The act has passed. It's legal. Right now, the act has passed, regulations are in place, so it's a legal regime. Yeah? So if we had crop if we had crop and product, you can go to the pharmacy and you could get product. It's legal right now. Yeah? So maybe what you meant in terms of recreational, like I said before, not legal. Government says it will do that under referendum, but medicinal cannabis regime, 100% legal. But you didn't ask that question, but I'm going to respond to the question, which is about, can you actually take your money and go to the bank? That may be problematic. I'm going to admit up front that will be problematic, right? And one of the reasons why that is problematic, and this is not only Barbados, this is not only Jamaica, only St. Vincent, this is globally, is because, remember I talked about the INCB before, that international organization, because they still have cannabis listed as what you would call a classified as a dangerous drug. It means that banks are reluctant to put themselves in a position to be accepting the proceeds of what is determined to be a dangerous drug, so that banks don't want to bank cannabis money. And that's the problem. The problem for us is, again, most of our banks are tied to larger banks in the US, and the US in particular, because cannabis is not legal at the federal level. So it means then that those banks that have what you would call correspondent relationships with US banks, most of them who are here in Barbados will not accept cannabis funds. And that is one of the biggest inhibitors, coming to you now, Colin, to the cannabis regime. At the same time, like I said, this is not a Barbados problem, but the cannabis industry is so growing. So people are finding ways. One of the ways is that you can work a cash regime, which is not necessarily ideal, but it is one of the ways that people have been working through the system. But we are actively working with our banks, working with the international partners as much as possible, trying to monitor what is happening. We've seen some changes, particularly with the incoming presidency of Joe Biden. And he has been more receptive. When I say he, his regime has been more receptive, and we've already seen some pro-cannabis bills coming through the Senate and getting some good support. So we are hoping that will help us change the landscape when it comes to banking. But I can come out to you, Colin, and again, I want to make a little bit of a controversial statement right here, because it's really funny, right? When you look at it, federally, cannabis is illegal. How many states in the US where medicinal cannabis itself is legal and is being banned? Yeah? So federally, it's illegal. We can run the banking here in Barbados. But across the states in the US, and every day a new one is coming on stream where they are making it legal and being able to bank their money. Our latest research has shown in that the US, we have credit unions now coming on stream in terms of banking medicinal cannabis money, and other banks, etc. But again, because it is not legal at the federal level, it creates an impediment. So the states can do it, we still can't get access to banking here. So, it's a contradiction that we have, but that's the international economy that as a small state that we participate. So that's my politicking here for tell me.
Yeah. I lived in the United States for 17 years. I worked at 3 banks while I was living there as well. Familiar with that. But my question is now, what will happen to our investment? Now, seeing that we cannot bank. We have 5 private banks in Barbados. Is it most of them or none of them? Any of them have come on board?
None of them.
And if none of them and if they have not come on board, what is going to happen to our investment?
All right. So I'll be very honest. I'll be very, very honest with you. I can only be very honest with you. So one of the things, or one of the best ways I can respond to that, is that it is very much a timed solution. Yeah? So a number of different things have been happening at the international level as we, when I say we as a country, have entered into the regime. So we've seen progressive changes that give us hope that it will change over time. And one of those things was, that I alluded to it before, that at the international level, we've seen the recognition. So cannabis before was classified as a Schedule 1 and as a Schedule 4 drug. The classification for Schedule 4 meant that there was no recognition that cannabis had medicinal properties. We've seen that changed in 2020. So that's a good thing. There is no recognition that cannabis has medicinal properties and is being declassified or not scheduled any longer under Schedule 4. Still Schedule 1, so that's one good thing. And as I said before, we've seen a number of bills going through the U.S. legislature in order at the federal level to make it legal. And those under the Biden, the Democrats, are looking extremely good. That's no comfort, but work with me here. So we have started, this is now 2021. If Jason gets his license in December of 2021, right, Jason? You get your license for cultivator. I can give you 3 whole acres, Jason, to work with. Jason got his 3 acres. But Jason can't start to cultivate on day 1 of November 1st, yeah? Because, Jason, you are not allowed under my license to start anything. You have to have your license in hand. I have to check your facility, anything like that, before you can put anything in the ground. So Jason has to then be able to put some stuff in the ground. You got to be able to cultivate it. Mature cannabis plants will perhaps 6 to 8, depending on the conditions, 6 to 8 months, depending on the conditions and how you grow, depending on the type of grow that you're using and the technology, whatever like that. So long answer to your question is that we are hoping that within that time that we will see some movement, yeah? That we will see some movement that would allow for banking. In the meantime, like I said, regimes are still functioning. Jamaica is still functioning and still has the same caveats that we do. St. Vincent is functioning and they have the same caveats that we do, yeah? And they are getting investment. People are investing the same exact way. But again, sometimes you have to use, whether it is going to be a cash-based business in order to be able to operate. You want me to give you an answer that I ain't got? I'm being honest with you, so don't beat me if I got the answer.
These countries that have businesses already investing and things are turning so, and there is such a difficulty with the banking system is concerned. I want to know how this money going to come,
So for instance, if you have to pay me for, I can just break it right down. If you have to pay me for an application or a license, right? So we can start from there. That's money, God got money in your bank account. So you pay the authority. Yeah, you're paying the authority for that. No, I work through the process, right? So you're next and you got your license. You want them to be able to have some money in order to be able to buy equipment. That's what you want, right? You want money to buy equipment, you got to pay people. No?
I understand now where I have product and I went to get it going.
Right.
I want to know how is that money being dispensed, seeing that in bank.
Oh, you mean how people are being dispensed? So what I can tell you to do, right, is I can tell you to call and I can put you in touch with another investor who may be able to help you, but I am not going to comment on how that is happening at this present moment. I'm not going to comment on how that is happening at this present moment. As the regulator, my concern is my little square that is right here, and you know the market is functioning as best as it can. Pardon? Yes. Right? But we talk about planning here already.
The question that I'm asking you, you can't answer that question because you're not actually investing in your regulator.
Right, exactly.
So at the end of the day, it's about profit and loss. You know, you're going to tell the procedure to get ourselves legally established. But after that, we want to know how we're going to put this money in our pockets. If the banks
I am with you.
Investors that are already making it happen, then
right.
One of them should be there.
But they might not be here today, but we could talk, and once they invite me back, we could bring some investors that could perhaps talk about it. But today we just wanted to at least give you enough information, to pique your interest and to move the conversation forward. But no, on a serious note, one of the things that we have done is that we've hosted investor chats where we have brought investors together from different licenses. But I do want to say, again, as you've noted, as the regulator, I gotta respect my square. We will facilitate as much as we can. We are working with a number of different agencies in order to address the issues of banking as much as we can, in order to facilitate the investment, working with Invest Barbados, all of the agencies involved. So we will do as much as we can to make sure that we can facilitate it. But as well appreciating that the industry is growing and expanding, and we also have to be able to adapt and to be flexible and to work through as the issues arise. And like I said, banking is something that perplexes the industry internationally. When Canada started, you had to have these huge safes. That's how people were banking their money. And there was regulations around security around these massive safes that everybody used to have. Yeah? In Canada now, the market has opened up a little bit, so there are some banks in Canada itself that are taking cannabis monies. So that there are various things happening within the industry, as we go. But we see forward progress in that way as well. Any other questions for me? Yes, please. Wait. I don't know. The media can ask questions at this. I'm just kidding. Yes, please. We don't need banks anymore? Tell me. Yes, tell me how we don't need banks. I think everybody wants to hear how we don't need banks. I would certainly like to know. Yes, I seriously want to know. That I can. How so? Tell me. Well, fair enough. But it's still about, and I don't want to go too deep into it, I do find that there is a system that operates that forces you into using particular avenues in order to engage in certain levels of activity. Yeah? So they're having a family bank works in a certain way, but I don't know that for the scale of activity. Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't know if this is program that bank just the other day.
Right.
Did you listen to that?
No, I didn't get to listen to it, sorry.
Okay, so there's a gentleman called Sabda.
Mm-hmm.
He's the group CEO of a company called Cal, right? So what happened to be one of the biggest companies in the Caribbean, international contacts, right? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
He said that the biggest asset class that he had invested in over the last 12 months. This is the program, watch the program, okay? That got him his best return, okay? It was the US dollar time. It was the US dollar. It was an investment in the US dollar.
What it was?
You do not need a bank to operate in the new financial system that we have now. That's why they try to educate Barbados for the last 4 years. But no, I'm happy to hear that Mr. Anthony Sabda, not almost, right? Is CEO of one of the leading corporations in Barbados, is saying that over the last 12 months, he has invested in an asset class that has earned him more money than he has ever achieved in other areas.
Agreed.
So what you're saying is, what you're saying, that you don't need banks anymore.
What was the medium that was used to transfer the money?
Is it crypto?
They call a lot of education, man. They've been trying the last 4 years. But no, Ms. Anderson, South is saying, yeah, it can happen.
So somebody is asking what was the medium. You don't want to say?
What's the medium?
Uh-huh.
Do you know what the medium is?
No, I didn't listen to the program. No, please. No, please. No, please. No, please.
I got a different conversation.
Yeah, that's it's a different conversation, but not Mr. Ho, it's a different conversation. But I also understand how we weave that context, because I think that, again, because we're talking here about how Barbadians participate, and how we move the curve. One of the things that we are attempting to do with the medicinal cannabis regime is about innovation. And that has to be the hallmark. Barbados is a small economy and a small country. We can't rest on our laurels and do things traditionally if we want to be able to break into new markets. So I appreciate conversations which push us.
Technology, right? So the fact is that technology is no money. Technology is no maps and code and money, right? You do not need bikes anymore.
So what is it then? What's the meaning?
All right, okay. So different conversation. So different conversation, and we'll work through it, and we'll
Can I
work
answer? Can I answer?
through it. Can you answer?
In one word.
One
right?
word.
You cannot create a bank, a family, a community, or two people with an asset class called Bitcoin. Alright? If you read my article in the report today, Helen is saying that Barbados is losing chance of being left behind because it's not cashed out how to collect Bitcoin. So honestly, it's not a worry about for years.
Do I know what you're talking
Go and listen to Mr. Andy Sackler, free, cheap, CEO of Answer the Cow. That is what he's saying. Listen to him, not listen to me.
All right, cool. Yes, sir.
You want to import more capacity and expand your operation. If you don't have access to investment, how do you import?
You see how great he's going to that to me? But no. So just that, I'm going to close, and then Mr. Hope. Mr. Hannah, Mr. Hope. Mr. Hope. Let me finish my medicinal cannabis discussion, and then we can have an economic currency conversation, which is interesting. So I can close off now because I can't believe it's something I'm talking about here talking so long. But just to say, I think like I keep saying, the signal message that I want to be able to leave with everybody here is one. I think somebody talked about it. We talked about education and awareness. So that if you want to get involved in the industry, we, and I say we, Barbadians, have to take some responsibility in making sure that we understand the industry, gain knowledge of what it is, the opportunities for investment and for participating. That's one. So that's a responsibility that we have to take on ourselves. And I'm going to be, like I said, I can't help but be honest, in all respects. And to be able to say that sometimes we can be a little bit risk averse. Sometimes, we don't want to be the one that steps out and take the risk, acquires the information, etc. But any good businessman will tell you that when you are starting something from scratch, it's always going to be a little bit risky. You have to stay with it. You have to be the one to go out there and do your own market research. Understand what it is that you are getting involved in yourself, because it's your business and it's going to be your investment. So that's the first thing. Two, the opportunities are myriad. And I'm not just saying this because I'm CEO in my position. I would tell you personally, if I wasn't CEO, I would open a security firm. Just saying, right? But the opportunities are myriad in order to get involved. And it's important that we take those opportunities within the industry. I also say to people, quite honestly, particularly young men, again, who may not have the capital, is that, and they don't often like to hear it because we always feel that we have to begin from a place of ownership. But all of these successful business people that I have looked at and learned, many of them didn't start owning, they started working for somebody, learning, and then being able to branch out and innovate. So there is nothing wrong with a model in which we are able to make sure that we have the skill and the expertise to be employed at the highest level. I'm not talking about anybody, starting from being bartenders and then taking that knowledge from the more experienced firm and then being able to branch out. One of the other things that I didn't mention that we are doing is actually providing the opportunities for Barbadians to have NVQs and hopefully a CVQ in the future in cannabis cultivation. We will be the first Caribbean country, even though we started a little bit late, to be able to offer that. So that even, again, if you don't want to touch the plant, even if you don't want to have a license, you can become qualified. Yeah? And with that CVQ, you can travel to anywhere overseas, Canada, America, and say, listen, I have qualifications in cannabis cultivation. And we're going to do that, and we are going to employ Barbadians who have the expertise, who may not themselves have all the qualifications at the start, but we're going to train them to be assessors. We're going to train them to offer the training so that we will have an ongoing system of here in which, again, we have qualified people in Barbados in this area of medicinal cannabis. So that's my second thing. The opportunities are myriad. Yeah? My third thing I can say to you, getting involved in the process may seem complex, but we have, as best as we can, provided a process which will help to facilitate you right from beginning, right to end. And my final thing, which I didn't mention before, but which I will, I talked about that one of the kind of fundamental pillars for us is innovation. Another pillar for us is about being inclusive. And I'm going to talk about myself and where I come from and why I'm so passionate about this. My family comes from St. Lawrence. Lived there all our life. I went to school at Springer. I grew up on the block. I've worked in the NGO community for quite a bit. And so that my passion, I cannot be CEO of an entity and not work as hard as I can to see Barbadians being involved in it. To me, that's the measure of success, the extent to which we can look in this industry and can see Barbadians operating at all levels and all types of Barbadians as well. That's my passion. And that's why one of our pillars is about being inclusive as much as possible. So yes, we are regulators, but we're going to try as hard as possible to make sure that we have a process which is inclusive of all Barbadians. Yeah, that's important. The third thing, though, is about the fact that we also want to build an industry that is integrated. One of the things that we don't do well is just that integration. We like to do things in silo, a bit here and a bit here. But we are hoping that this medicinal cannabis industry can have linkages with education, can have linkages with agriculture, can have linkages with tourism, and so that there will be multiple strands where this industry will be able to intersect, and the benefits then will be much wider. And that's something, again, that we are working hard at. One of the very first things that we did was not immediately to jump in to say, okay, we got to get the regulations and stuff, but it was having conversations with people, having conversations with agencies, having conversations with different groups of people to say, how can we work this thing? What it is that we need to be able to do to make this thing work? Who do we need to talk to? What are the conversations that we needed to have? When we started innovation, we had what we call a blue skies meeting, where we just brought together young people, young men, and said, listen, tell us what this industry should look like in order for it to be successful for you. Yeah? And because we're doing that, we also want to be as flexible and as dynamic as possible. So the very, very last thing I'm going to say to you is that I'm not presenting to you, and we are not suggesting that this that we have now is what the industry is going to look like 2 or 3 years, because we're building something. And as you build something, as it grows, it changes, you have to be able to adapt. So we intend to be adaptable as we listen to what the market is saying to us, as we understand the market, to be able to adapt. Our legislation, unlike perhaps some of the others within the region, gives the authority, the ability to be able to make rules and procedures, and that will allow us to be able to adapt and change to the market as we listen to what is happening. So this is not a closed conversation when it comes to the medicinal cannabis regime that we are building. So thank you so very much. I hope I have not overstayed my welcome. I don't want to talk long. But thank you very much for the conversation and for the engagement. I don't know if there are any other questions, but thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Monroe Knight, for your very insightful and thought-provoking presentation. I hope that the audience would have taken away from here something that would help them as we go down this road with our medicinal cannabis. I now ask the Parliamentary Representative for the constituency of Christchurch East Central, Minister Ryan Strong, to come and say a few words to you. Mr. Strong.
Good night, everybody. Before I begin, I must say this is a welcome change because we haven't had a physical meeting for some time, and I know that there are some of you watching online that have enjoyed this wonderful presentation, and I really want to thank you, Chantal, for taking the time to come here this evening and to share some very vital and critical information on how we are building what I hope will turn out to be something that Barbadians will embrace. And I listened very carefully at the back to the exchanges, and I'll just share a little bit in terms of what we are doing to address some of the current hurdles, if for lack of a better term. But certainly I want to first impress upon Barbadians that this is something that we can do. And to the extent that your participation in this endeavor can be rolled out, I really want to encourage all of you within earshot to first and foremost reach out to the authority, get to understand what is required to be involved and determine for yourselves how you want to be involved, but also recognize that wherever there's a challenge, there's always a way to innovate around such challenges. And therefore, as Barbadians, I think we have it within us to be able to achieve that. It may not be smooth at the beginning, but in building something from scratch, there's no template to be followed. You have to get in and be able to sink your teeth, so to speak, into what may be a perceived problem. But with any problem, there comes an opportunity for a solution. And in learning and executing that, it means then that we can start to build a level of expertise within which then we can share to be able to exploit said opportunities. And so this is something that is very exciting for me, and I think as part of the government, it is something that we really want to be able to explain at the very, at all levels with respect to how persons can participate. I know, I heard you make reference to transportation and security, and those are perhaps some of the easiest areas within which one can participate in the context of the conduct of it. Now, however, I will say to you that the critical thing in all of this, as we have been trying to focus on at I would say at a macro level, is we have a lot of money, not just in the banking system. We also have a lot of money within the credit union system. And within the context of there are some Part 3 companies, financial institutions on island that have a reasonable level of capital as well. So as government, over the last few years, as we have been trying to move out of one crisis, and obviously COVID has created some different challenges, one of the key things that we've been working on is how do we mobilize the resources that we do have to be able to build out and make sure then that ordinary Barbadians like yourselves will be able to benefit from those resource mobilization. Now, I think Chantal would have gone through quite a bit in terms of from cultivation to research and development, and a whole range of activities within a very new space that domestically, when you really think about it, most of us are members of a credit union. And therefore, the conversation as it relates to mobilizing resources, let's say for research and development, is one of those areas that you're looking at the long-term perspective in terms of being able to get a return on investment. And who are the owners of credit unions? Us, as Barbadians. And therefore, it makes sense within a very clear regime how we could finance not just research and development, but any of these other areas that we are speaking to with respect to being able to access capital. What is the downside? The downside is that it works. That really is the downside. Because if we are able to innovate and think clearly outside of the box, because I think we must recognize that as credit unions, and let's be clear, as credit unions, there are global relationships that exist. And therefore, to the extent that the need to deal with correspondent banking is an important issue. But if you build a domestic enterprise, industry, where you're not just cultivating, you're doing the necessary innovation for manufacturing, processing, and all of those things in place. You negotiate the access to the markets to be able to export, whether that is regionally, whether that is in Africa, whether that is in Latin America, because one of the issues that we have always had is that we always look north. And to the extent that we have to recognize that in the 21st century, we have to look global and work with persons who are prepared to work with us to be able to help solve some of our problems. And therefore, I say to our Barbadians, let us not be daunted by the fact that at the federal level in the United States, that marijuana usage is illegal, but they're allowing it to be used within the states, which is clearly a double standard, clearly, which may then present a hurdle for us if we want to access their markets. But why are they doing that? Because they want to get a head start on something that really and truly, technically, we have the expertise already to be able to do. But what we want to be able to ensure in building this industry is to deal with any issues as it relates to quality, because one of the things that they talk about very clearly when it comes to trade and these issues, they use fancy words like non-tariff barriers. So they will tell you that the quality in this and all of these things. So the reason that the authority will be insisting that you start right from the beginning is to ensure that whatever the end product happens to be, that we can get it sold, that there won't be any regulatory issues with respect to being able to access the markets, so that from the very inception, that we can assure any Barbadian who wants to participate that in so doing, and you follow those very clearly defined regulations, that you'll be able to bring your product to market and be paid. The how you will be paid depends on where you're exporting to and the arrangements that you put in place with the various agencies to so do. And so we see this as a clear opportunity for us to be able to mobilize those domestic resources very forcefully, but not only to look north, as I said, but look regionally, look to Africa, look to Asia, look to South America, in order to ensure that in building a new industry, we're not just looking north, you're looking global. And therefore, you have a better opportunity for success so that when you're able to ramp up that you can ramp up and do so in a way that allows for a clear sense of not just creating an industry, but something that Barbadians can sink their teeth into and that we can all be proud of. I want to make it clear though, I feel and I know that we can do this. But people often hear about the foreign investor coming in at the 30%. The truth is, I want all of us to be able to go in and work with other Barbadians on our own, yeah, for the 100%. You may need expertise from outside. That is no problem. But I don't want people to only believe that the only way that they can participate is if there's somebody from the outside coming in and you're limited to 30%. So I want to make sure that those who are listening here this evening understand that if we all work together and acquire whatever expertise we need to acquire, that we as Barbadians can build a very successful industry. But equally, getting expertise and capital from outside is also part of building the industry. So you should not come to the conclusion that you're only limited in any way to a 30% participation. That 30%, as Chantel says, is to ensure that if anybody's bringing any money from outside and they're coming to use our resources, our land, and all of these things that we may allow them to do, and foreign direct investment is important, that we have built in a mechanism to ensure that ordinary Barbadians like yourselves can play a critical role in building up this industry and to be able to benefit from it like anybody else. And therefore, it is really up to all of us to look beyond what is the current circumstances that COVID certainly has presented for us, because, and I accept that in the current environment, it is perhaps difficult for most people to be able to think about venturing into something new. But the reality is that this is part of how we will be able to recover, which we anticipate that with as broad-based participation as possible. And it may mean us, on the one hand, looking to determine how do we create a new institution domestically that can deal with the financial hurdles that certainly have been placed upon us purely on the basis of some of the regulations designed to make it harder for us to trade. But there are solutions around that. Part of the discussion before refers to whether it is a digital version of the currency or using some type of technology to be able to trade. There are always options available for us to be able to do that. But what is required is that as ordinary Barbadians, that we avail ourselves of the information and we make the best possible choices that we believe are in our best interest. And so I really want to urge you this evening and those who may be listening online to reach out to the licensing authority, get the information, and have a discussion, because you don't have to make a decision tonight. You don't even have to make a decision tomorrow. But at some point, I want us to be able to have discussions, not just with your credit union, but certainly even with the companies that you work with, have the discussion. Because at the end of the day, this is an opportunity that ordinary Barbadians, whether you are here at Dayton Griffith, whether you're a maid or a teacher or the principal here, or you work in the canteen here at Dayton Griffith, or any part of Barbados, there is a piece for everybody to be able to participate in. And how we structure that with the creation of new potential instruments for persons to do so, I believe there is a way for us to be able to finance this so that ordinary Barbadians can participate. And Chantel will tell you that yes, there have been some serious challenges. Within the context of the Ministry of Finance, we've been trying to resolve some of the issues, certainly dealing with correspondent banking, which is often complicated by the way that the various lists, whether from the EU or the OECD or all of these lists, that whether you're gray or black or green or whatever the color the list is, so long as you're on a list, people are watching you for everything that you do. But there's nothing that we are doing in Barbados that will cause any economy in the world to crumble. And therefore, we continue to ensure that we follow the law, number one, and to the extent that persons may feel as if they have to do something or feel like they got to have a whole set of cash in a safe somewhere to be able to trade is really as if you're living in the dark ages. And the truth is that we, as government, we are working to be able to find solutions to get around some of these issues related to money laundering and those kinds of challenges, which we fundamentally believe that the digitization of the currency would facilitate. It will not necessarily make it smoother, but it will facilitate it so that we can say to any authority, whether it is the OECD, the EU, or whoever else that may be looking on to try to sanction Barbados, or for those of us in the Eastern Caribbean or the rest of the CARICOM, that we would have been able to develop a solution that satisfies these issues. But don't be fooled. It is a very competitive marketplace, and therefore we have to be consistently on the edge of innovation when it comes to these matters. And therefore, we really simply cannot rest on our laurels in any way with respect to the building of not just this new industry, but certainly how we are able to move forward in the future, because we believe that this will open up a space where not just for jobs here in the island, which is important, but the development of the expertise, the exporting then that expertise across the region or globally is important. And therefore, as we have sought to widen our diplomatic engagements globally, this is an area that we believe that can help, that is consistent with that thrust. And therefore, it is really up to us as Barbadians to really shake off the COVID fatigue and focus very squarely on how are we going to build out something that is very exciting, new, to be able to say to our children and grandchildren that we added a dimension to the economy that is innovative and that will be transformational for a lot of people. Now, a lot certainly is going on in the country and certainly regionally and globally. And to the extent that the government is focusing right now on ensuring that we can maintain the reopening of the economy, consistent certainly with being able to keep Barbadians and all those who reside here safe, it is important that all of us recognize that certainly the next 12 months to 18 months are going to be very interesting with respect to the dynamics of Barbados. And therefore, whether it is the resumption of tourism, whether it is the building out of this new area with respect to medicinal cannabis, the acceleration of the implementation of renewable energy with respect in the context of the economy, these are things that Barbadians traditionally, as it relates to tourism, will participate in. But there are other areas of avenue of opportunity that Barbadians can have a place in if we are a little more adventurous, if you like, innovative with respect to the resources that we do have, and to ensure then that we are able to mobilize them as efficiently as possible. We also know that the government is embarking on a very aggressive housing program, not just to respond to the homes that were damaged with respect to the passage of Hurricane Elsa, but really to be able to help ramp up and ensure that Barbadians at all levels, but certainly within the context of providing truly affordable housing, that we're going to be very innovative in the way that we do that. And the HOPE program was launched a couple of months ago to be able to facilitate said opportunity for average Barbadians. That too will help to fuel some opportunity within the context of the domestic economy, and therefore we see the next 12 to 18 months, certainly 2 years, is going to be very, very critical with respect to being able to accelerate the recovery. But that recovery will only take root if we have enough people in Barbados, certainly following all of the protocols that are set out, certainly with respect to the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And I really want to salute the staff there, because they've been doing yeoman work with respect to the contact tracing and being able to facilitate and adjust their protocols to protect ordinary Barbadians like us from the worst outcomes that COVID has presented. And I hope that all of us will continue to follow those protocols, because I do not at any time want to see any situation arise in Barbados where you have persons like I saw in India dying outside of hospitals or polyclinics waiting for oxygen. And we have been working hard as a country to be able to ensure that we put the protocols in place. But it also means that we must use all of the tools that we have available to us to be able to fight this thing. Because in order for us to be able to bring the economy back, in order for us to be able to help ease some of the anxiety that persons are having from the fallout to COVID, it means that vaccinations and the access to vaccines, that I urge Barbadians to become vaccinated once they're available. I know the issue, some persons have been very concerned about what they've seen overseas and all of these types of things, but the reality of our situation living on a small, open economy is that certainly in the context of our health profiles, we have a large number of persons who are already afflicted with some type of non-communicable disease, which puts us as a population more at risk. And therefore, for our own mental health, for our own sense of well-being, certainly from a financial and economic perspective, we have to work together in order to ensure that we can defeat COVID. And therefore, following the protocols and getting vaccinated as soon as vaccines become available for Barbadians to participate will help us to be able to keep Barbadians safe on the one hand, but also to ensure that with the resumption of tourism and that with the building out of a new sector, that we can do so in a space that we're not starting and stopping. Because every time you start and stop, it means you gotta put in the same work, or new work, to achieve the same objective, which really becomes then a little counterproductive, and it doesn't really make sense for any business to be able to survive in such an environment. So my simple message is this: we have to decide how we want to come out of this pandemic. We have to decide how we are going to participate in the recovery. And I know that for a lot of people, jobs have been lost, certainly in the last 18 months, because of COVID-19. There are still opportunities available as we bring back tourism, but I don't want us to bring back tourism to go back to the way things were in 2019. We really are working as hard as we can to ensure that ordinary Barbadians can truly participate in the recovery and to feel the benefits of the recovery that we anticipate will come, because whether we like it or not, whether we accept it or not, as the rest of the world is being vaccinated, it means that things will return more to normal. Of course, there are still variants out there which can spraddle things that we are seeing happening elsewhere, but we have to run our own race, as I said, to ensure that we in Barbados defeat COVID-19. And I say to Barbadians, we can't be fighting COVID and fighting ourselves too. And therefore, we have to be absolutely focused on the mission, which is to ensure that we protect as many Barbadians and those who live here as possible, that we can get people back to work so that that financial anxiety that exists in far too many households in Barbados tonight, that those can be eased, and then we can take advantage truly of the opportunities that will come along because we've been able to settle ourselves and focus on executing the mission. So follow the protocols, follow the protocols, follow the protocols. No matter whether it's a variant or the original thing or whatever it is, we got to follow the protocols. I'll end on this. The government of Barbados is not going to be running around the country trying to inject people with vaccinations. That doesn't make sense. And I say to those who feel this anxiety from, and perhaps it's the source of it is a bit interesting, but the reality is that some people feel it. And we simply have to have conversations with our neighbors every day. We have to have conversations with our co-workers every day to get them to come to a place where they are comfortable with the idea that this is part of how we can respond collectively. And therefore, I know to some of us, the protest that we saw yesterday doesn't quite make sense for a lot of us in our minds, but we have to accept that we are still Barbadians and that people have the right to protest, they have the right to dissent, but they're still Barbadians. And because of that, we will continue to encourage them as much as we can to be able to help protect themselves, to protect their families, and ultimately to protect all of us, because as Barbadians, that is how we do things. And therefore, I don't want anybody to jump on anybody because the march or that they feel a certain way. Whilst I may not understand totally how they've arrived at that conclusion, it is my responsibility, certainly as a citizen, as a member of parliament, as a part of the government, to continue to have conversations with people about why, as Barbadians, we need to protect ourselves first. And along with the protocols, any vaccine that is available, you take it, because that is part of the arsenal of protecting ourselves and our country, which will help to alleviate some of the financial stress and anxiety, because we can put people back to work and the economy can open on a sustained basis. We can welcome back tourists. We still gonna follow the protocols. The tourists can still follow the protocols that we set, because Barbados is perhaps one of the only countries that's still requiring tests and quarantine, even though we are opening back to tourists, because the health and safety of Barbadians is too important for us to be able to not use everything in our arsenal to help protect you, to help protect your jobs, in order to ensure then that you can support your families and your communities. So let's continue to have the conversations at church, as I said, with your neighbor, with your co-workers, even with strangers. And I will beg people, please, I know that there's a lot of information out there, but there's also a lot of misinformation, disinformation, all kinds of bad information. If you have any issues or concerns about the vaccine, the best person to speak with is your healthcare provider, your doctor. I know for some of us men, we don't really go to the doctor very regularly. And perhaps then it may be your wife or your girlfriend or your mother or whoever who may be able to give you that wise counsel. But the reality is, let us not read things on the internet and assume them to be true without having a serious conversation with medical personnel in Barbados who can advise you properly, given the nature of whatever conditions you may have, as to the safety and the efficacy of the vaccines, which really will help all of us, to be able to just calm down and ensure that we can open back and continue to make progress and recover from COVID-19. But I'm gonna stop there. If there are any specific questions that anybody wants to ask, I'll be happy to do so. But the reality is I really want to thank Chantel for what was a very excellent presentation. I know that we had a slight hiccup with the presentation, but I thought you engaged the members very well this evening. And we will continue this conversation, if not virtually, to have a much wider participation in terms of the constituency and fielding more direct questions as a follow-up. But I really do want to thank you for taking the time out to come here and discuss this very important set of opportunities, and say to the members that if you have any questions, field them through any of the executive. I know there are a few that came in the comments online, and we will use that as part of the next rollout to be able to start to do that. So that's it from me, and I want to say to the constituents of Christchurch East Central, and certainly for the rest of Barbados, that the government is working on the behalf of every single Barbadian. And we cannot allow disinformation to tear us apart. We've gotten this far because as a country, we've held together and we've responded to what has been the most extraordinary challenge of our lifetimes. And as reasonable adults, let us use the actual information, given our circumstances in Barbados, what is happening here, and let us make the right decisions in the interest not just of the country, but certainly of ourselves, our families, and our communities. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Strawn. It is at this point that we bring our meeting to a close. I thank you all for coming, and I hope that the presentation was helpful. And as we leave to go to our respective destinations, I ask you to go and be safe, follow the protocols, do not forget, and be safe. Go in peace, and may the God of peace go with you.